just came back from a recent trip with my family and we discovered a mirror in our guest bedroom looking like this when we got back home. And so then when we took a closer look, we discovered the previous homeowners used command strips to put this up. Now the reason they did that is because there's no mounting hardware anywhere on this. And that's actually pretty common for a lot of mirrors out there. Typically what builders will do is they will put construction adhesive or a mirror mastic compound, smear it all over the back, and then paste it straight onto the wall. Now that's all great and nice if you are just building this home and you don't care about it, but if you think there's ever a chance that you might change things up, you might want some type of method that you can remove this, which is probably why the homeowners went with command strips. But that's not a good solution either. So instead of a build video, this week we're going to be working on a little home renovation project, and I'll show you how to mount this mirror to this wall. So eliminating the construction adhesive and the command strips that we've already seen are not great options for hanging out this mirror. We have a few different methods that could be used for mirrors, artwork, picture frames, anything that you would typically hang on a wall. There's a bunch of different methods out there. So simplest is probably just your regular nail. If it's something a little bit heavier and you need a little bit more bite into drywall and you're not going to be hitting a stud, you can use a drywall anchor and a screw as a potential thing. There's also these specialty hangers out here that are a little hook with a nail at an angle. They make single ones, double ones, they make a variety of different ones that are specifically made to handle heavier items than regular just artwork. So this mirror could be a candidate for that. The problem with all of these items is there's no hardware, as we said, on the back of this picture frame for where to mount that. Now, you can go to your regular big box store and buy what they call these sawtooth hangers. These just nail into the back of your frame, and then that allows you to rest your picture right on a nail or a screw head or something. Problem with that is it can pivot very easily. Somebody bumps this, it's gonna wobble. These are also really more meant for something that's a little bit lighter weight than what this mirror is. So not a great option there either. The other option is to hang some high tensile wire on the back of this mirror, and then the wire can be hooked onto these hooks that we just talked about, or even just a nail or a screw can rest on this. Again, that allows for pivoting if somebody were to bump this. It's great for heavy duty artwork that's hanging up on your walls where people aren't going to be touching it a lot. But a mirror in a bathroom that's a high traffic area, people will be getting close to it to look at themselves. It's more likely to be bumped, so I don't like that option either. Instead, what we're gonna go with today, and what I would recommend for something like this application, is using a specialty router bit called a keyhole bit. And you'll notice that the top portion of the router bit is wider, and then it has a narrower cutter underneath. What that allows is for you to plunge this into the back of your piece, and you'll make a large hole to be able to fit a nail head or a screw head into that larger hole, but then it'll cut a smaller groove in the back so that the head of the nail gets caught and cannot pop out. How you get that to work is after you plunge this piece in, you slide it up just a little bit on your piece, and that'll allow you to cut a groove in the back that's recessed, that's larger, and a narrower portion in the front. Then you slide this bit back down to where your original starting person was before you pull this out, so that you only have one large hole created in the back of your piece. But we'll walk you through the steps. It should be a pretty easy process.
First things first, let's stitch those pretty much useless command strips that are on the back of this mirror. Now, I could have tried to freehand route out the keyhole slots, but instead of taking a chance and messing things up, I decided to set up two fences as guides. The first fence I'm mounting onto the bottom plate of my router, and this is going to act as an edge guide, keeping my router bit the exact distance away from the outside edge of my mirror. This ensures that my keyhole slot that I am making runs perfectly, vertical up and down, and does not come out crooked. Quick tip on setting this up is to use a square to make sure that the edge guide fence is perpendicular to what I'm going to call the leading edge of the router base. This will come in handy later on when we set up the second fence. The second setup part that I am doing on my router is to ensure the depth of my bit is appropriate to cut deep enough in my mirror frame, but not blow out the front side by cutting too deep. I used a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood as a visual reference, as this is close in thickness to my mirror frame. Now, laying out our plan on the back of the mirror is critical to saving from headache later on when we go to mount this. By taking the time now, it will make my life easier in the long run. What we need to do for layout is to mark where the keyhole slot is going to start and where it is going to stop. The stopping point is the truly critical part, as it needs to be level on both sides of the frame, otherwise the mirror will not sit level on the wall. To ensure this, I marked a spot for our second fence. This will act as a stop block, ensuring that I route both my keyhole slots to the exact same height. Now, I could have just gone with a reference mark here, or I could clamp my temporary fence down onto the mirror, but I decided to use some double-sided tape to adhere my fence at both of my marks. Another important part to consider is the distance from the leading edge of the router base to the keyhole bit. Mine was 3 inches. So I made sure to put my stop fence 3 inches higher than where I wanted my slot to end on the back of the frame. The second mark to make on each side is where the keyhole slot will start. This doesn't need to be as exact as the endpoint, but it should be relatively close on both sides for ease of mounting. I opted to just mark this spot 3/4 of an inch down from where my stop fence was positioned. Next came the routing out of both of the slots. If I was using a plunge router, then I could just position the base on my starting reference point, plunge the bit into the frame, and route out the slot. But I'm using a trim router, so instead the trick is to position the leading edge of my router base on my starting reference point, but keep my router tilted up. I then tilt the router downward so that it gradually plunges the bit into the piece before routing out the slot. In order for the keyhole slot to function as intended, I had to route the slot up, but then I had to remember to go back down to my starting point before pulling the bit back out. I flipped the frame around to get at the other side, and this time remembered to clamp the whole thing down so that I wasn't fighting to hold it in place while I routed. I felt a little smarter this second time around and turned the router off before removing it, so there was no risk of ruining the freshly made slot with a blowout. With everything now ready, I grabbed some drywall anchors, screws, and a tape measure and headed back inside. I quickly realized I had forgotten the mirror. Back out I went. One of the reasons I hate command strips is because they were marketed as a safe solution to put stuff on your walls without damaging them. But I've always found the opposite to be true. As you can see, removing command strips often pulls the paint right off with it. Personally, I think a single nail hole is much easier to patch and cover than a large spot where the paint ripped away with some removed strip. But hey, maybe that's just me. In this case, these patches will be covered by the mirror, so I can leave them for now to worry about another day and come back to patch them. Before hanging the mirror, I went ahead and double-checked the positioning on the wall to figure out where it should sit. I then began to measure and mark where the holes for my hangers would be. To find the appropriate height, I added the distance I wanted the bottom of the mirror to sit above the vanity top to the distance the top of my keyhole slots were from the bottom of the mirror frame. To ensure the mirror was centered, I measured the horizontal distance from my wall to the center of my vanity, which is easy to see as it was aligned to the faucet. I then measured the width of my mirror, which was 20 inches, and I had positioned my keyhole slots 1 inch in from each of the side edges of the mirror frame. That meant I needed to mark 9 inches left and right of the center point of the vanity to put holes for the mounting hardware. For those of you that hate mental math, 20 inches minus 1 inch on each side is 18 inches. Divide that by 2 to get the 9 inches. Now, we talked about a few different types of hardware you can use to mount this. My holes were not aligned to any studs, so I went with drywall anchors and screws. This is also nice because you could fine-tune how tightly the mirror sits against the wall by either tightening or loosening the screws with a screwdriver. I punched the holes for the anchors with a wood awl that I have, but you could easily opt for just using a screwdriver. Just make sure that you keep the holes small enough that the drywall anchor fits snug. It was then as easy as putting screws in my anchors and then sliding the mirror into place using the keyhole slot we made to slip over the heads of the screws. I did a quick double check to make sure everything was level, and then this easy repair was done. Well, there you have it on this little repair job. I want to thank you for staying tuned this long on the video and hope you got something useful out of it. If you did, please give us a like, a comment, or subscribe to our channel for more videos like this in the future.